They got plans to grow Rhode Island smartly. I'd say grow Rhode Island at all. Anyway, Grow Smart Rhode Island is an organization that is in the conscience of movers and shakers here in Rhode Island on how we ought to progress as a community. They've got ideas. I've got questions. We'll get after it tonight. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you aboard. Welcome into my state of mind. I am Dan York. Who are you, by the way? Let me know on your state of mind later on in the broadcast. Let us go to the top of the rundown. You know how Paul Harvey used to say, now the rest of the story. We've got the rest of the poll. And of course, we shall lament those who are unpollable in Rhode Island. And they, I guess, are unpollable. This is heating up around the White House like I don't think the president even projected. I'm having trouble figuring out why, right? And we go to page 2. You got to show up. We got a solution. Jess has a solution. She gave it to me just before showtime tonight. Okay. Pretty good commentary, huh? And I really, the right thing becomes necessary, becomes newsworthy. I'll explain my not my exasperation, but my curiosity over what becomes news these days. All right, we got a lot to dig into. The rest of the poll. You saw this data last night, right? We talked to you about this just to remind you where the gubernatorial race is. Angel Deveris with a 4-point lead over Gina Raimondo, and Clay Pell receding, and his unfavorables getting higher because he lost his car and couldn't explain it. And then Todd Giroux, good old Todd. I think that 2% might be worth something. But there's a whole bunch of undecideds out there. In general, the Democrats in Rhode Island really don't have a feel for anything right now, according to our pollster, Mr. Fleming.
You got more than 1 out of 5 voters who have not decided who they're voting for in this campaign. So in the next 3.5 months, we're going to see the campaigns really make the strong push to try to get those undecided voters on their side.
Well, absolutely. That's their mission. Now, as we get into the warm weather and the primary cycle and the primary season becomes more and more of a challenge. Of course, there are other questions in the Pro-Joe Eyewitness News poll, including the 38 Studios poll. Democrats seem to trust government more, and they are evenly split as to whether to pay the bonds that are due to the investors that bought 38 Studios financing from us. I would suggest that if more independents and Republicans were in this poll, it would skew back to the original. Most people, or more people than not, don't want to see it paid. Of course, you ask Link Chafee about it, it's like yesterday. All my stories seem like they will just...
There was so much groupthink. I remember going to Lori White at the Chamber of Commerce when I was against the proposal, saying, Lori, I'd like to have the Chamber come out against this. And she said, my board's in favor of it. And my jaw just dropped. What's going on in this state? We're going to give a retired baseball player $75 million?
I was so right once. I was so right once. And I'll say it over and oh, please. Can he leave fast enough? We know you didn't like the 38 Studios deal, but what you won't admit to, Mr. Chafee, is that you let the ball drop. Bump, 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 bump. Like the dog's out, you let the ball drop. Bump, 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 bump. Can someone tell him that other than me? Thank you. Moving on. I don't know what I'm moving on to. Oh, the treasurer's race. And Tim White had this story.
Eyewitness News Providence Journal poll asked 500 likely Democratic primary voters who they want for treasurer. The results. Former Treasurer Frank Caprio leads the pack with 29%. Political newcomer Seth Magaziner has 11%. Former State Auditor General Ernie Almonte takes 9%. But a whopping 46% aren't sure who they'll vote for.
The governor's race sucks the oxygen out of all the lower ticket races.
Eyewitness News political analyst and pollster Joe Fleming says with such a high number of undecided voters, things can change dramatically.
It's going to be important for these 3 candidates to start to get their message out in the next month or so to the voters to try to put some meat on their bones so the voters will know who they are.
Right now, it looks like the winner of the primary will automatically become the state's next treasurer. No Republican or independent candidate has come forward to run against a Democratic nominee.
No Republican has come forward to run against the Democratic nominee. Remember that embarrassing note as we move on to Rundown issue number 2. The unpollable elephants. Those would be Republicans for those of you in Burrowville. 5-yard penalty for me. Fung Block, 2 Republican candidates. While Eyewitness News and the Providence Journal polled the Democratic voters, they didn't poll the Republican voters because there ain't enough of them, says Ted Nesi, who came here last night to explain away that and a whole bunch more.
10% of voters are actually registered Republicans in Rhode Island. It is so hard to forecast what a Republican electorate will look like in a primary. We don't love that we're not giving you both primaries right now, but it would be worse to hand out data that we don't think is accurate or just pull.
Will you do that? Will you do both parties prior to the primary one more time, or
I'm
no?
not. I don't.
You guys are not touching the Republican primary.
I don't believe so. No.
Another psychological blow to Republicans. One of whom dialed your state of mind last night, and I had to put this up front.
If you're not going to put a Republican percentage of which way the voters are going to go on TV on your show, I might change my vote if you put it on, because if I don't like Alan Fung and I see Bach's going to win, I'll stay Republican. But if not, I'll vote for Gina or the mayor of Providence.
You know, he's got a point, because folks who are at least unaffiliated decide which primary they're going to vote in, and without some basis of information as to whether or not you're going to impact an election, you may decide to do something. Well, anyway, you don't have the information. Listen, I have no criticism about the news. You know, my own employer here at Lynn Television and Projo just deciding to do these polls. I mean, look, I'm glad they do the polls. It used to be everyone did polls. Now there are a few media outlets that actually provide the resources to do the polls. But it is something that has got to be discussed, I think, more thoroughly as we go down the line, because Republicans are so negligibly followable when it comes to politics that they become a non-entity. The general election will be a whole different story, but you got to get there from here. Another blow to Republicans. They're not even pollable. Ouch. Ooh. Ooh. Although the candidates have their own polls, but that's another conversation. Next item up. I just don't understand a couple of things here. Now listen, we got to be not too flippant with this, right? Because we have a soldier that has been recovered. CNN.com has the headline. It's every day now that this story progresses, and now we've seen the video of Sergeant Bergdahl's release from the Taliban to American troops. Here's some news coverage of it.
The Taliban released this video showing the handover of Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl to U.S. Special Forces in eastern Afghanistan. Bergdahl is quickly searched for possible explosives before being lifted into the helicopter and flying to freedom. The propaganda video then shows the Taliban's farewell message to its former hostage. But the rescue and recovery of America's only prisoner of war in Afghanistan is being overshadowed by controversy. Without notifying Congress, as required by law, the U.S. released 5 Taliban leaders from Guantanamo Bay in exchange for Bergdahl's freedom. There's also anger from some of Bergdahl's fellow soldiers who say he walked off his post.
He needs to stand trial for what he did and stand up for his actions.
A petition on the White House website calling for Bergdahl to be court-martialed has already received 15,000 signatures.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You know, this is a very touchy story in multi-directions, but I'm a little confused. Did the president know what this file looked like on Sergeant Bergdahl? How could he not, authorizing this kind of action over a lengthy period of time? The heat in the kitchen is going to get hotter and hotter and hotter here. And the homecoming feeling for this story is not going to feel like the final chapter. Next item. You got to show up. This is unbelievable. Did you see this headline? Providence ranks high in study of teacher absences. Can I just say that 47%, according to this data, 47% of Providence teachers are reportedly chronically absent from their jobs. The highest percentage of teachers that are absent in the state, and the 8th out of 40 large metro markets that were analyzed. Providence Teachers Association. I know it's difficult. Inner city kids can be tough, blah, 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 show up for work. Jess said before the show, she says, hey, you know what? If I could just call in and leave a voicemail message that I was sick, I would do that. That's kind of a different version of what she actually said. But the point was, I thought, right, Jess? The point was, have them call into somebody in person and not just leave a voicemail. That was your point, right? More or less. She's mad at me, I think. I don't think I characterized her exactly the way she wanted to, which is why I told her, get a camera so she can have equal time on this show. The mysterious Jess. People are going to wonder, is there really a Jess? No. Not tonight, anyway. But true, if you leave a voicemail, it's easy to go, oh, that was easy. That's redundant. Finally. Things become, almost finally, things become newsworthy when you do the right thing. This is very strange. Look at this headline. We'll talk about this on the radio tomorrow, I think. So this track coach, well, here's this. We've got this audio and kind of let you know what he thinks.
We try to teach our kids to do the right things.
Winning isn't everything, so like being a good sport, and that's what he did yesterday. And I'm proud of him for it.
I don't regret it. I think it's the best decision I've made, you know, and it was the right decision to make.
Listen, of course it was. What was it? Okay, so they had a track meet, a championship track meet, and they won. Except when he went back and he calculated what the officials had written down, they had messed up some of the finishing results, and when he recalculated, they were third. And so he called the league office and said, guess what? We were third, not first. And they said, you're right, you don't win the championship. Sorry. He said, thank you very much. And now he's a star in the news. Now listen, good guy. Why is that newsworthy? Was there a time in our history when people did the right thing and it wasn't such a big deal? Just wondering. Big deal tonight, game one. Got to get game one. If we don't get game one, next, stay with us. All righty. Grow Smart Rhode Island has a voice here in Rhode Island about how we, well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We have a headline here from their latest activity. Facing the challenges, focusing on the challenges that cities face, all that kind of stuff. Scott Wolf runs this organization. Welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Dan. Pleasure.
Tell everybody what Grow Smart Rhode Island does.
Sure. We promote sustainable economic growth in Rhode Island through policy research and advocacy, through training of local officials about how to make good land use decisions. And a lot of our focus is on advocating for incentives and tools to make it more attractive to develop in our cities and to live in our cities, to develop where infrastructure already exists, which we think is more efficient and better overall for the economy and for the society.
Who funds your group?
Corporations, individuals, foundations, some government, but 85% non-governmental sources. So
okay.
We hustle for the support.
You have an agenda, and we're going to put it up here, I think, if we have a chance to do that. Thanks, Rox. Grow Smart Rhode Island 2014 Legislative and Policy Agenda. There's a lot of stuff on there. Economic development and community revitalization, expanded transportation choices, the farm viability. That's interesting. We'll get to that in the second segment. But let's start with economic development. Listen, everybody wants to know. I mean, the poll that we just had, Eyewitness News and Projo, jobs, 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 jobs. They don't even care, Scott, if the place is dirty.
Right.
No, they don't.
No, I understand.
They don't care if it's dirty.
At
They
least some
want
don't.
some more doggone jobs.
Right.
Talk to me about that.
Sure. Well, we want jobs in a bad way too, and in a good way, hopefully. But we think that if the state assesses its assets effectively, that we can have what we call sustainable economic growth, playing to our strengths as opposed to acting out of desperation to try to lure some big barracuda from out of state
Okay,
here.
so that's a reference to 38 Studios.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's the thing that everyone's hanging their hat on 38 Studios is the thing not to do. As if everybody was a rocket scientist before the whole thing happened.
Well, no, I understand. And I understand there were some well-intentioned people who thought maybe there'd be a breakthrough, and maybe there could have been. But I do think it is emblematic of a lack of self-esteem in our state, including among some of our leaders, in a sense that we have to throw the long bomb in order to progress economically, as well as opposed to looking at our incredible collection of historic buildings and neighborhoods, which to some extent we have invested in, and we advocate continued investment in those and incentives to invest in those. Looking at our ports and harbors, during the Kachira years there was sort of a moratorium on any development of our ports and harbors. looking
Well,
at
that's your Quonset has grown.
well, it has grown, and it
You
has.
just didn't like the container port idea.
Well, that's true, but and we weren't wild about a full-scale container port either. But there's a lot in between a container port and doing nothing.
Okay.
And we are. I think we're finding that happy medium now, as you pointed out. We're one of the largest importers of cars of any port in America right now, down at Quonset. So, but we think if we're looking for the quick fix and the big bang, we're going to potentially undermine our quality of place and our long-term marketability. We definitely need to reduce our costs and streamline our permitting, but we're never going to be a low-cost state, not in my lifetime.
But this is interesting to me because I've been advocating for the big idea. That doesn't mean the big transaction.
True.
But the big idea. If we don't reposition ourselves having, well, whether it's a 0% sales tax, whether it's an elimination of the personal income tax or a significant deal like that, whether it's some kind of fertile ground establishment where businesses are going to want to flock here because it's almost impossible not to want to. We need a big idea, I think.
Well,
a big idea. No,
I think we need to. I think the big idea, the revolutionary idea in Rhode Island, is to acknowledge that we have strengths and that we should apply more of our public policy.
We got the water.
Well, not only that, we're compact. We're user friendly. We should invest more in transit to take full advantage of that. We should have a new transit hub next to the train station, so when out-of-state business people and tourists come to Rhode Island, they can get around the state more easily than they can right now. This is building on comparative advantages. We tend to play in the other person's court. We've tried to market our greenfield sites, our sites out in the countryside. We don't have many of them, and they're expensive, and it's not really environmentally the best option to develop them, as opposed to our urban, funky, historic sites, where we have as much of that per square mile, per capita, as anybody in the country.
All right, we're going to see if we can break this down into layman's terms. Exactly what we should do. 1, 2, 3. Next. Welcome back. Scott Wolf is the Grow Smart Rhode Island Executive Director. Here's the thing. When we get into this government gobbledygooky or this whole, what we should do type of thing, people start to go, oh my God, I don't understand. Whatever, brownfields this and Grow Smart that and roadmap all right. Give me a 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We're fixed. What is it?
Well, I will give you 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure that they will fix everything, just as a caveat, but I think we need to continue to invest in the state historic tax credit. So
those are $5 million at a pop
maximum.
It's been reinstituted by the governor.
That's right, but it's already oversubscribed.
We have another chattable challenge here with the Superman building, right?
Yes.
They're looking for $39 million, and I frankly I'm bullish on the idea that there's going to be some government help for that project, because I think to have a loose tooth in our front line, city skyline, skyscape, if you will, would be a mistake.
Yes.
There are a lot of people that think that's absolutely abhorrent. Do not give them a nickel, their own business people. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that they do warrant for the larger public good some support. Whether $39 million is the right amount or an appropriate amount, I'm not sure.
Because it fits in the formula of historic, but the money they're looking for is way out of the bounds.
Exactly, and that's one of our concerns, is that other significant projects, say Pontiac Mills and Warwick, they have enrolled in the new historic tax credit program. They could probably qualify, if there wasn't a cap, for a lot more than $5 million, but there's a cap that we supported because we knew there were limited resources.
So reinvesting in historic buildings, I think people understand that. 2.
And 2 would be strengthening our transit system. Getting
trains running everywhere?
Well, not only trains, but improving our bus system, promoting more bus rapid transit, which RIPTA is about to introduce.
People think if RIPTA's losing money, it ought to go. I don't agree. That's an investment. I don't know why we put so much pressure on RIPTA to actually break even.
Yeah.
It is an investment in getting people around. It can bleed on the pro forma. It just has to perform, moving people into economically advantageous positions, I think.
Absolutely, and there's more and more people who are switching from cars to RIPTA. There are more and more so-called choice riders, people who may own a car but have decided it's too much of a hassle to everyday commute into the city.
50 miles long, 35 miles wide. Why can't we have a statewide train system? In 20 years. Why can't I get in my car in Cumberland, drive a half a mile, get on the train, get into Providence, and zip out to East Providence to Channel 12? Why can't I do that? Because we don't have it.
Well, it is expensive, but it is something that we could benefit from, because it would really take advantage of one of our basic strengths. We're so small, we're so compact.
And number 3?
And number 3, I would say, would be to spend more money on promoting our tourist sector. I think that's one of our...
Got to get a theme first.
Well, yeah, but you
got to get a theme, got to agree.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of assets.
We do, and we spend a lot less per capita than Massachusetts and Connecticut do on their tourism attractions. So those are 3 things, but there's more.
Come back on a later show this summer, and we'll talk more about the plan in general rather than quick hitters.
I'd love to.
Who's your candidate for governor?
We don't endorse any candidates.
Boy, you see that freak show?
But
that was fun.
But I think there's a number of good.
Can we do that again?
People
Who's your candidate for lieutenant governor? Whoa! Good to see you, Scott.
Good to see
Appreciate
you. Always a thank you.
All right, your state of mind when we come back. Stay with us. Whoa! Don't ask that. Your state of mind is so important to us. Here's how you get in touch with us. 228-1886 is our voicemail. We played a very disgruntled GOP viewer earlier in the broadcast. State of mind at myritv.com. And of course, you can tweet and Facebook post. This next response has to do with this little ad that's been running on the television. I think Fung's ad was in poor taste, and a preteen mentality of name-calling would not want him running Rhode Island. Sorry, we got the comment before the ad. Here's the ad that Paul is complaining about. Don't be a blockhead. It's... Oh, man. I mean, is it creative funny? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of assertions that are not factually correct, and if you're a voter Ken Block, you got insulted by being called a blockhead by the Fung campaign. By the way, there's more insult to come because the Fung campaign just put out a press release today that put the governor and Ken Block as 2 peas in a pod. And we'll talk about that tomorrow as the politics of Rhode Island continue. Grow smart, Rhode Island. But don't ask about endorsements. We'll see you on the radio tomorrow at noon on WPRO and right back here 7:30 on MyRITV. Good night.